A wrong button press sent him to the Warfront. He returned with a medal, and a beautiful war bride. Ethan Drayton had always lived a life of careful routines. As a junior engineer on the orbital research station Aurora 7, far above the sparkling cities of Earth, his days were predictable. He checked system diagnostics, ran maintenance routines on the station's reactors, and occasionally enjoyed the small luxury of sipping recycled coffee while watching the stars drift past the observation windows. Life was quiet, safe, and strangely comforting. He had no illusions about heroism or glory. The universe, from his quiet perch in orbit, felt vast, indifferent, and entirely unthreatening. That calm existence, however, was about to end in the blink of an eye. It was a late evening when Ethan sat hunched over a new communications console the station had received from Earth. The device was sophisticated, filled with blinking lights and touch-sensitive panels, and it required careful handling. Ethan's fingers moved across the controls with habitual precision. The hum of the station's systems, the faint hiss of recycled air, and the quiet vibration of distant engines were the only sounds in the room. Sleep tugged at his eyelids. Just a small moment of distraction, he thought, and then his finger slipped. A red button flashing ominously clicked beneath his touch. The console emitted a loud mechanical beep. Ethan froze, his heart thumped in his chest. "Warning," a calm, emotionless voice said. "You have activated emergency deployment protocol. Immediate transfer required." "No, no, that's a mistake," he shouted. He pounded the console, pressing cancel, override, anything that might reverse the command. "Procedure irreversible," the AI assistant replied, its tone unflinching. "Please prepare for immediate transfer to the Martian Warfront." He was an engineer, not a soldier. His life was spent repairing circuits and calibrating sensors, not charging across battlefields or dodging alien fire. Panic clawed at him, but the station had no sympathy. Before he could react, a blinding light enveloped the room. The sensation was unlike anything he had experienced, disorienting, stretching, compressing at once. His stomach lurched and his limbs felt weightless. Then, almost as suddenly, the world snapped back into focus. He was no longer on Aurora 7. Around him, the air smelled sharp, metallic, and faintly of ozone. The hum of the station was gone, replaced by the roar of engines and the distant clatter of armored vehicles. Soldiers moved around him, faces hardened by battle, weapons slung across their shoulders, their eyes flashing with suspicion and curiosity. Ethan, in his plain engineer's uniform, looked completely out of place. "Hey, who's the new guy?" a gruff voice barked. A tall man with close-cropped hair and a scar running down his cheek approached. I'm Ethan Drayton. I think there's been a mistake. I'm not supposed to." Now standing among these soldiers, seeing the dust-red horizon and the jagged structures of human fortifications carved into the Martian soil, it was terrifyingly real. He tried to make sense of it. Soldiers were moving efficiently, speaking in clipped, precise terms, coordinating logistics, checking weapons, and scanning the barren plains for threats. Huge transport vehicles rumbled past, their engines shaking the ground beneath him. Somewhere in the distance, the unmistakable sound of gunfire and explosions echoed faintly. "How do I survive here?" he muttered to himself. No one answered. Survival, he realized, would not come from luck alone. He had to think, to act, to adapt. The days that followed were a blur of instruction, confusion, and relentless observation. Ethan was thrust into boot camp for civilians, a short, intensive crash course designed to turn engineers, scientists, and other non-combatants into functioning members of the Martian Defense Forces. He learned to handle energy rifles, though his aim was erratic. He ran drills across Martian terrain, often tripping over rocks or nearly colliding with others. He memorized protocols for defensive formations, learned emergency extraction routes, and even attended briefings on the alien forces that were striking human colonies with frightening precision. Yet, amidst all the chaos, Ethan noticed something remarkable. While the soldiers were trained, disciplined, and fierce, There was a pattern to their behavior, a rhythm in the way they solved problems in the field. They relied not just on weapons or strength, but on creativity and quick thinking. Humans on Mars adapted in ways the enemy could never anticipate. In that realization, Ethan found a spark of hope. Maybe, he thought, survival wasn't impossible after all. One evening, as the twin moons of Mars cast long shadows across the barren landscape, Ethan wandered the perimeter of the camp, trying to process everything. The sky glowed with the faint reds and oranges of Martian dust, and in the distance, the sound of distant bombardments echoed. He saw soldiers returning from patrol, some injured, some silent, and some joking to mask the fear he could see in their eyes. And then he saw her. Lyra, a communications officer, was crouched over a device that looked like a hybrid of a terminal and a radio tower. She moved with purpose, her fingers flying over controls as she relayed messages between different outposts. Ethan watched her for a moment, struck not by beauty alone but by the sheer competence and confidence in her movements. She seemed calm, unflinching, a human anchor in the middle of chaos. "Drayton," she said suddenly, looking up. Her eyes were sharp and assessing. "You're the new civilian engineer, right? Don't worry, you'll either get used to this, or you won't last long. You'll need your mind and a lot of luck." Slowly, he began to see the patterns of war, not in terms of brute force, but strategy, adaptation, and human ingenuity. He also began to see small glimpses of camaraderie forming among the soldiers. Shared meals in the mess hall became moments of laughter, brief but precious. Stories of past battles were told, lessons passed on, and sometimes, amid the smoke and dust, a joke would ripple through the ranks, and the terror of Mars would feel a little less heavy. Ethan realized that humanity had a resilience that no alien force, no matter how powerful, could entirely destroy. Then came the first real test. A routine patrol reported a small alien strike team heading toward the colony's outer defenses. Panic rippled through the soldiers, but Ethan noticed something in the data, an anomaly in the enemy's movement pattern. It was subtle, something a trained combatant might have overlooked in the heat of the moment. He hesitated, unsure if anyone would listen to a civilian engineer's observation. But Lyra nodded at him, giving him a brief, almost imperceptible gesture of encouragement. "Go on," she whispered. With trembling hands, Ethan outlined a plan to reroute energy barriers, create a decoy patrol, and lure the enemy into a canyon where the natural Martian terrain could amplify defensive measures. The soldiers were skeptical at first, but time was short. Hesitation would mean casualties. To Ethan's surprise, his plan worked. The aliens were caught in the canyon, where explosions reverberated, creating chaos in their ranks. Human defenders held their positions and managed to repel the strike. Casualties were minimal. Ethan's heart raced, a mix of fear and exhilaration. He had survived his first encounter with real combat, and he had contributed meaningfully. Soldiers who had doubted him now looked at him with a hint of respect. That night, as he sat beneath the red sky, Lyra joined him. They didn't speak at first, simply watching the stars and the distant lights of the colony. Finally, she said, "You're not like the others. You think differently. That's dangerous, but also valuable." Maybe he could even make a difference. In the weeks that followed, Ethan continued to adapt. Each day brought new challenges, new threats, and new lessons. He learned that fear was natural, but courage was choosing to act despite fear. He saw that human ingenuity, quick thinking, creativity, and the ability to cooperate under pressure could overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable. By the end of the first month, Ethan was no longer just a civilian engineer. He was a part of the human defense, a small but meaningful piece of a larger machine fighting for survival on a distant world. And though he did not yet know the full horrors or glories that lay ahead, he understood one vital truth. Humanity had a strength that no alien threat could fully anticipate, and even the smallest mind, pressed into extraordinary circumstances, could make a difference. For Ethan Drayton, A wrong button press had sent him to the warfront, but for the first time in his life, he felt alive. Ethan Drayton had survived his first weeks on the Martian warfront, but survival was just the beginning. The dust-red plains stretched endlessly under twin moons, and beyond the fortified walls of the colony, danger waited in every shadow. Every day brought a new challenge, a new threat, and every night reminded him that nothing here was guaranteed. At first, the other soldiers were polite but distant. Ethan was still an outsider, a civilian thrust into a war he had never imagined. He struggled with drills, tripped over equipment, and often misread the protocols. Yet slowly, the soldiers began to notice something unusual about him. His mind worked differently. He saw patterns where others saw chaos. He noticed weaknesses in enemy strategies, improvised solutions to supply shortages, and ways to optimize energy shields that engineers in the colony had overlooked. It began with a small task, repairing a damaged energy turret near the eastern perimeter. The usual maintenance team had struggled to bring it online after a minor skirmish, but Ethan quickly assessed the problem. Using spare circuits and some quick rewiring, he had the turret operational in a matter of hours. The soldiers who had doubted him watched, and something shifted. They began to ask his opinion. They started including him in tactical discussions. Then came the real test. The colony received reports of a scout unit from the alien forces approaching under the cover of a sandstorm. The attack seemed small at first, almost insignificant, but Ethan noticed irregularities in their movement patterns. They were not advancing randomly. They were testing the colony's defenses. He suggested a simple diversion: reroute a patrol to the northern ridge and create false heat signatures along the southern wall. It was an unusual tactic, one that relied on deception rather than brute force. The commanding officer hesitated. "You're an engineer, not a soldier," he said. "Are you sure this will work?" That night, as the sandstorm roared across the Martian plains, the aliens advanced toward the colony. They fell for the decoy exactly as Ethan predicted. Turrets fired accurately from hidden positions, disabling the alien scouts and forcing the rest to retreat. Casualties were minimal. The soldiers who had doubted him now looked at him with something between awe and disbelief. Amid the tension of war, Ethan also began to notice the subtle bonds forming among the soldiers. Small gestures, a shared meal, a quiet conversation under the stars became powerful moments of connection. Lyra, the communications officer who had first encouraged him, became a constant presence. She was brilliant, precise, and unafraid to challenge him when necessary. Together, they worked late into the night, repairing communication networks, planning patrols, and analyzing intercepted messages from the enemy. One evening, as they recalibrated a long-range antenna, Ethan watched her work. "How do you stay so calm?" he asked. Lyra didn't look up. "Calm? I'm terrified," she said softly. "I just don't let fear make decisions for me. Panic kills more people than the aliens ever could." When supply lines were threatened by alien ambushes, Ethan devised clever detours through canyons and unstable terrain, keeping essential goods flowing. When sensors malfunctioned due to electromagnetic interference, he improvised shielded circuits that restored communications. Each success increased his confidence and earned him the respect of his peers. Despite these achievements, war was relentless. The alien forces adapted, learning from their failures. Their attacks grew bolder, more strategic. One morning, the alarm blared as a large strike team approached from the southern cliffs. Ethan, now part of a reconnaissance squad, joined the soldiers in the field. The aliens moved with frightening speed and coordination. Traditional defenses would have failed. Ethan noticed a pattern in their formations and shouted instructions to the squad. "Split into 2 units, use the canyon walls for cover, draw them toward the ridge." The alien units were funneled into a natural trap where their movements were restricted, and Martian gravity amplified the effectiveness of the colony's explosives. The strike was repelled, and the humans survived once more. The victory was costly, but it had an unexpected reward. Ethan found a deeper sense of purpose and a bond with those around him. Lyra stayed by his side, assisting in damage control and coordinating reinforcements. They worked in silence at times, but their shared understanding was profound. Words were unnecessary. Survival had created a connection stronger than anything they had known on Earth. One night, after another skirmish, the squad gathered around a small fire pit in a sheltered alcove. The Martian wind howled outside, but inside the alcove, there was a moment of warmth. Soldiers shared stories of home, dreams, and lost friends. Ethan listened, realizing that these human connections were as vital as any weapon. The strength of humanity was not only in intelligence or technology, but in its ability to care, to bond, and to support one another even in the darkest times. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan's confidence grew. He no longer stumbled over drills or hesitated in combat. His engineering skills became tactical advantages, his unconventional thinking an asset on the battlefield. Yet, he remained humble, knowing that luck and human ingenuity together were what kept them alive. Then came the most dangerous mission yet. The alien forces had discovered a secret supply cache critical to the colony's survival. Losing it would mean a devastating shortage of ammunition, energy, and medical supplies. Ethan was assigned to lead a small team to secure and defend the location. The terrain was treacherous, a mix of jagged rock formations and unstable cliffs. Visibility was limited, and the threat of ambush was high. Ethan devised a plan using both technology and terrain, motion sensors disguised as rocks, traps that funneled attackers into narrow passes, and decoy supply crates designed to mislead the enemy. The operation began at dawn. The team moved cautiously, keeping low and silent. Ethan's heart pounded, but he focused on the task at hand. When the aliens attacked, they fell into the traps exactly as he had predicted. Explosions echoed through the canyons, and the human defenders pushed forward with precision and determination. The mission succeeded, and the supply cache was saved. That night, exhausted and covered in dust, Ethan and Lyra walked along the ridgeline overlooking the colony. The stars twinkled above, indifferent to the chaos below. "You've changed a lot since you arrived," Lyra said quietly. Ethan smiled faintly. "I had no choice. I either learned or I didn't survive, but I never imagined I could actually make a difference. Ingenuity, courage, determination, that's our edge." Soldiers turned to him for advice, commanders consulted him for strategy, and even the most skeptical veterans acknowledged that a civilian engineer had saved lives through nothing more than clever thinking and calm resolve. Yet Ethan never let pride take hold. Each day brought new challenges, new threats, and new lessons. He knew that one mistake could undo everything. The war was far from over. But with each obstacle, he learned to trust himself, his instincts, and the humans around him. Through every skirmish, every sandstorm, and every close call, Ethan Drayton became more than a civilian. He became part of something larger than himself, a human force on Mars, resilient, resourceful, and relentless. And in this crucible of survival, he discovered the true meaning of courage, not the absence of fear, but the decision to act with intelligence, heart, and determination when the stakes were highest. For Ethan, life on the Martian warfront had become more than mere survival. It had become a proving ground for human ingenuity and spirit. Each success, each bond, and each act of bravery reminded him that humanity's greatest weapon was not its technology or firepower. It was the mind and heart of the people wielding it. And as he looked toward the distant horizon, Ethan realized that the war had only just begun. The weeks turned into months, and the Martian warfront had become a harsh and relentless teacher. Ethan Drayton had changed in ways he had never imagined. No longer the clumsy engineer thrust into combat by a single accidental button press, he was now a trusted member of the human defense forces. Soldiers turned to him for advice, commanders consulted him for unconventional strategies, and even the most hardened veterans had learned to respect the quiet confidence that came with his problem-solving skills. But the war was escalating. The alien forces had grown more organized, more strategic, and far more dangerous. They were no longer sending small scout teams or testing defenses. Now, massive strike squads moved across the Martian plains with precision and purpose, and entire colonies were under threat. Humans were forced to innovate faster, adapt quicker, and work together more efficiently than ever before. Ethan had learned to thrive in this chaos. Each day required him to balance fear with ingenuity, to trust his instincts while relying on teamwork. One morning, a warning signal blared across the colony. Alien forces had been detected moving swiftly toward the southern ridge, and intelligence suggested they were targeting the main supply depot. Losing it would cripple the colony, cutting off food, ammunition, and essential energy reserves. Ethan was called to the command tent along with Lyra and several high-ranking officers. Maps, holographic displays, and sensor readings littered the room. Officers discussed defensive strategies, their voices tense but controlled. Ethan scanned the data, noticing subtle irregularities in the alien formations. Their approach was not straightforward. They were using terrain to their advantage, attempting to force humans into kill zones. "They're predictable if we think like them," Ethan said, pointing to a narrow canyon along their projected path. "We can lure them there, use their own tactics against them. It's calculated, and it gives us the best chance to minimize casualties." Ethan worked tirelessly alongside engineers and soldiers, recalibrating equipment, strengthening barriers, and preparing traps. The colony hummed with activity as everyone contributed to the defense. Even the youngest recruits were given tasks, their fear tempered by purpose. When the alien forces arrived, the battle began. Dust and debris swirled as explosions erupted across the plains. The decoy patrol moved exactly as Ethan predicted, drawing the enemy toward the canyon. As the aliens funneled into the narrow path, energy turrets activated and artillery fire rained down with deadly accuracy. The humans fought with precision, using the terrain, the traps, and their ingenuity to their advantage. Ethan moved through the battlefield like a conductor, coordinating units, adjusting strategies in real time, and ensuring that humans maintained the upper hand. Soldiers he had trained with, joked with, and laughed with now followed his commands without hesitation. Their trust was absolute. During the heat of the battle, Ethan noticed a group of alien attackers breaking through the western flank. He quickly devised a secondary plan. Using portable energy barriers, he and a small team created a temporary blockade, diverting the attackers into a clearing where turrets were waiting. The maneuver succeeded, saving many lives and further tipping the balance in favor of humans. As the battle raged, Ethan and Lyra found themselves fighting side by side. Together, they repaired damaged communication relays, coordinated troop movements, and inspired the soldiers around them. Their trust in each other had grown into something deeper, an unspoken bond forged under fire. In moments of brief respite, they exchanged glances that spoke of mutual respect, admiration, and a quiet understanding that neither had experienced before. When the dust settled and the last of the aliens were repelled, the human forces had won a decisive victory. The supply depot remained intact, the colony was secure, and countless lives had been saved. Exhausted but triumphant, the soldiers gathered in the central square, their faces smeared with dirt and sweat, their eyes bright with relief and pride. Ethan was summoned to the command tent, where the commanding officers recognized his extraordinary contributions. A medal was presented to him, a symbol of courage, intelligence, and the indomitable human spirit. For the first time, Ethan felt the weight of his journey. He had come to Mars by accident, terrified and unprepared, but through ingenuity, courage, and determination, he had not only survived but had become a symbol of hope for everyone around him. Even in victory, the war had taken its toll. The colony had lost friends, some of whom had trained him, laughed with him, and shared stories of home. Ethan grieved for them, but he also recognized the resilience of humanity. In every loss there was learning. In every setback an opportunity to adapt. In every victory a reminder of why humans had survived and thrived against impossible odds. Lyra joined him after the ceremony, her eyes reflecting the stars outside. "You were amazing," she said softly. "Not because you fought, but because you made everyone around you stronger. You reminded us what humans can do when we think, adapt, and refuse to give up. You changed the outcome." Amid the chaos, there were moments of unexpected humanity. Soldiers celebrated birthdays, shared personal stories, and laughed at small absurdities, reminding themselves that even on Mars, life was worth cherishing. Ethan learned that these moments were just as vital to survival as any weapon or strategy. Humans endured not just because of skill or firepower, but because of connection, loyalty, and compassion. One evening, as the twin moons cast a pale glow over the colony, Ethan and Lyra stood together on the observation platform. The war still raged in distant sectors, but the colony was safe for now. Ethan reflected on how far he had come, from a nervous engineer thrust into combat by a single mistake to a trusted strategist and symbol of hope. "You've changed a lot," Lyra said quietly, "and not just in how you fight. You've shown everyone what humans can do. Hesitation is, and that humans can survive anything if we use our minds and hearts together." A new message had arrived from a distant colony, reporting alien movements and requesting immediate assistance. Ethan's heart raced, but he felt ready. He had been tested, pushed to his limits, and had proven that human ingenuity, courage, and determination could overcome even the deadliest threats. As he prepared for the next mission, Ethan realized that he had not only survived Mars but had thrived. He had turned fear into action, uncertainty into strategy, and chance into opportunity. And through it all, he had found something unexpected, a connection with someone who understood him, who shared his challenges, and who had become more than a colleague, someone who had become indispensable. The warfront remained dangerous, and the challenges ahead were greater than ever, but Ethan Drayton was no longer a civilian lost in combat. He was a human symbol of ingenuity, courage, and hope, a reminder that even in the harshest environments, humanity's greatest strength lay in its mind, its heart, and its refusal to surrender. As he stepped into the command tent, ready to plan the next defensive maneuver, Ethan glanced at Lyra. Together, they represented what humans could achieve under pressure, under fire, and under impossible circumstances. Their bond, forged in adversity, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. And for Ethan, that bond, combined with his experiences on the battlefield, showed him something profound. War was not just about survival or victory. It was about proving that humanity, in its creativity, courage, and connection, could achieve the impossible, even on a planet as harsh as Mars. Ethan knew the war was far from over, but he also knew that with intelligence, courage, and human ingenuity, there was no challenge too great. Humanity's story was one of survival, adaptation, and triumph, and he was proud to be part of it. And as he and Lyra prepared to face the next wave of challenges together, he realized that the Martian warfront had given him more than fear, struggle, or survival. It had given him purpose, friendship, and a love forged in the crucible of conflict, a reminder that even in war, humanity's heart could shine brightest. The final months of the war were the hardest yet. Alien forces had adapted to human strategies, and their attacks grew more frequent and more lethal. Entire colonies had fallen, and the stakes could not have been higher. Every day on Mars was a struggle for survival, but Ethan Drayton had become something more than just a soldier. He had become a leader, a strategist, and a symbol of human resilience. He and Lyra worked side by side, their bond stronger than ever, forged through shared danger, trust, and mutual respect. The colony received word that a massive alien strike force was advancing on the main human stronghold, a fortress that protected critical supplies and research facilities. The message was grim. If the stronghold fell, the remaining human colonies would be left vulnerable, scattered, and defenseless. Every soldier, engineer, and volunteer was summoned to prepare for the coming battle. Ethan and Lyra immediately joined the command team, analyzing intelligence reports, scanning maps, and coordinating defensive measures. Ethan studied the alien movements with meticulous attention. Unlike previous encounters, these forces were organized, coordinated, and relentless. Yet he noticed patterns, subtle weaknesses in their approach. He devised a plan that relied not on sheer force but on human ingenuity, using the Martian terrain, improvised traps, and precise timing to turn the enemy's strength against them. The strategy was risky, but there was no alternative. As the troops prepared, Ethan walked among the soldiers. Some were exhausted, some injured, and some quietly fearful. He offered words of encouragement, reminding them that every human life mattered and that their creativity, courage, and teamwork were their greatest advantages. Even in the face of a superior enemy, Ethan believed humans could prevail. Lyra joined him as they surveyed the battlefield. "You really think this plan will work?" she asked, her eyes searching his. Ethan nodded. "It has to. We have no other choice. But more than that, I know it will work because humans are unpredictable. The aliens can anticipate weapons, patterns, and tactics, but they can't anticipate creativity, courage, and determination." Ethan moved quickly, coordinating units, repositioning troops, and adapting plans on the fly. He had become a master of improvisation, using every resource available to outmaneuver the enemy. The aliens were strong and fast, their technology formidable, but humans had advantages of their own. Ethan's traps worked perfectly, channeling alien units into confined spaces where turrets and artillery could strike with devastating effect. Supply convoys moved along hidden routes, ensuring that defenders remained well-equipped even under constant attack. Amid the battle, Ethan and Lyra were inseparable. They moved from one strategic point to another, repairing damaged systems, guiding squads, and ensuring communication lines remained open. Their teamwork was seamless, almost instinctual. Soldiers watched them with awe, inspired by the coordination and trust between the two. The fight reached a critical point when a massive alien squad attempted to breach the central gate. Human defenders were under intense pressure, and casualties mounted. Ethan quickly assessed the situation and called for a daring maneuver. Using a combination of energy barriers, controlled explosions, and a diversionary attack, he created an opening that allowed human forces to push back the aliens. The plan worked perfectly. Alien units were repelled, and the central gate held. The battle was not without sacrifice, but humans had endured and prevailed. Soldiers cheered, though many carried the grief of fallen comrades. Ethan took a moment to survey the battlefield, recognizing the cost of survival. Yet he also felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Through intelligence, courage, and unity, humanity had triumphed once more. After the battle, Ethan was called to a special ceremony. The commanding officers praised his ingenuity, leadership, and bravery, awarding him a prestigious medal. It was a moment of recognition, not only for his accomplishments but for what he represented, the spirit of humanity, capable of surviving and thriving even against overwhelming odds. Yet the greatest reward for Ethan was waiting outside the ceremony hall. Lyra stood there, her face radiant despite exhaustion. She stepped forward and in a quiet voice said, "You did it. We did it." "We did it," he agreed, realizing that the bond they had formed, through strategy, battle, and trust, was unbreakable. The following days were spent rebuilding. The colony repaired damaged structures, restored supply lines, and strengthened defenses. Humans shared stories of courage, laughter, and resilience. Ethan and Lyra worked together to organize training sessions, improve communication systems, and mentor new recruits. Their leadership inspired confidence and hope. Amid the reconstruction, Ethan reflected on his journey. He had arrived on Mars by accident, terrified and unprepared, yet he had survived, adapted, and grown. He had discovered that human ingenuity was a powerful weapon, that courage was not the absence of fear but the choice to act despite it, and that connection and trust were essential for survival. He had also found something he had not expected: love. Lyra had become more than a partner in strategy. She was his companion, confidant, and equal. Their bond had grown through shared hardship, mutual respect, and unwavering support. The harshness of Mars had forged a connection that neither could ignore. Together, they embodied the human spirit, resourceful, resilient, and capable of achieving extraordinary feats even in the most dire circumstances. Eventually, the time came for Ethan to return to Earth. His mission on Mars was complete, and the colony was secure. The journey home was quiet and reflective. As he looked out at the red plains receding into the distance, he thought of the soldiers who had fought beside him, the lessons he had learned, and the bonds that would last a lifetime. Earth greeted him with celebration. News outlets heralded the return of a civilian engineer turned war hero, a man whose ingenuity and courage had saved countless lives. Friends and family marveled at his story, amazed that a simple mistake, a wrong button press, had led to a journey that changed the course of a distant war. Lyra accompanied him, and together they received recognition not only for bravery but for leadership, intelligence, and the spirit of humanity. Wherever they went, people were inspired by their story. They represented the best of what humans could be: courageous, creative, and resilient, even in the face of impossible odds. Ethan found joy in simple things once more: walking on Earth's green fields, feeling the sun on his face, and sharing quiet moments with Lyra. Yet, he never forgot Mars, the challenges, the battles, or the people who had shaped him. He understood now that human strength was not measured by weapons or power alone, but by creativity, determination, courage, and the bonds forged between individuals facing adversity together. In time, Ethan and Lyra decided to stay together, not just as partners in strategy or war, but in life. They shared a home filled with laughter, learning, and stories of survival. Their love, born in the crucible of Mars, became a symbol of hope and resilience. Friends and comrades often visited, and every conversation reminded them of the lessons learned on the Red Planet. Ethan sometimes chuckled when people asked how he had survived. "It started with one wrong button press," he would say, "and ended with understanding that humans can do incredible things when they refuse to give up." Humanity had survived Mars because ordinary people rose to extraordinary circumstances, relying not on strength alone, but on ingenuity, heart, and unwavering determination. Ethan often told young engineers and cadets that courage was not about perfection or invincibility. It was about creativity, perseverance, and the willingness to act even when the outcome was uncertain. He shared stories of Mars, of improvisation under fire, and of the power of trust and collaboration. Every listener understood that the essence of human survival and triumph lay not just in physical skill, but in intellect, empathy, and resilience. And so, the story of Ethan Drayton concluded not with a battle cry, but with quiet triumph. He had returned from Mars with a medal, yes, but he had also returned with something far more enduring: Lyra by his side, a testament to love forged in adversity, and the knowledge that humanity, in its heart and mind, was capable of overcoming any challenge. The accidental journey to the warfront had transformed him. From a timid engineer, fearful and unprepared, he had become a hero, a leader, and a symbol of human ingenuity and courage. Mars had tested him, the universe had challenged him, and he had prevailed. Ethan understood now that humans had an edge that no alien force could anticipate: the power to adapt, to think differently, to trust each other, and to act with determination and heart. And that edge, he knew, would carry humanity forward, wherever the stars might lead them. As he stood alongside Lyra watching the sun set on Earth, he realized that his story and humanity's story was far from over. There would be new challenges, new frontiers, and new battles, but the lessons of Mars would guide them. Humans survived because they dared to think, to act, and to care. That was the true victory, and it would endure far longer than any war. For Ethan Drayton, the wrong button press that had sent him to war had led to a life full of meaning, purpose, love, and triumph. And in the quiet moments as he held Lyra's hand and gazed at the stars, he knew that humanity's spirit, the ingenuity, courage, and resilience that defined them, would never be broken.